Okay, so Mr. President, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this afternoon. It's truly an honor to have you here at GMA. Let me get started.
Thank you.
Yes, you've been a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize and you've had extensive experience when it comes to achieving peace. I'd like to know your thoughts on the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's been more than a month now. Where do you see this going?
I do not wish to sound pessimistic, but if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli-Arab relation in general were always complex, it's far more difficult now to see how there can be a reconciling of the very extreme opposing views, worsened by, first, the lack of confidence, of trust on the part of the Palestinians vis-à-vis Israel and international community since the first Oslo Accord, since Camp David. A lot was promised to the Palestinians in terms of a Palestinian state that became an illusion, was betrayed. Then a confiscation of land, expulsion of people, etc., etc. That alone created extreme disappointment, disillusion, and mistrust on the part of the Palestinians. Then Prime Minister Netanyahu expanded the settlements in West Bank, contrary to agreements, contrary to international law. Then Hamas did what they did, unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. One thing is Hamas stand face to face with the Israeli Defense Force. Another is to attack Israeli civilians, children, women, elderly, some people in their kibbutz, in their homes, and were massacred. Unacceptable. And that caused Israeli retaliation, a retaliation that was beyond proportion, that destroyed a whole territory, that killed more than 10,000 Palestinians, 80% of which children.
Yes.
Gaza became a cemetery of children. That also is completely unacceptable. We cannot criticize Hamas aggression, massacre of civilians, without criticizing Israeli bombardment and destruction of Gaza. So, with this in mind, I don't know of any Palestinian who would believe at all in international community and or believe at all in any Israeli government. So, answer to your question, I'm pessimistic that there is going to be a solution and the final realization of the two-state solution.
Is that two-state solution still a viable option at this point? Is the two-state solution still something that you would advocate at this point?
Yes, the two-state solution was what discussed way back in the Oslo Accord in '93, but never happened. There was some movement, for instance, Palestinian leaders who are in exile in Tunisia, in Europe, they were able to return to West Bank, to Gaza. A Palestinian authority was created to manage limited affairs of West Bank and Gaza, limited affairs. But over the years, Palestinians saw that the Palestinian Authority had next to no authority. It is supposed to be, Palestinians supposed to have some degree of autonomy. What kind of autonomy is that the central government, in this case Israel, will collect taxes, from everybody, including immigration taxes, and then it is Israel that would transfer or not the money to Palestinian Authority. So Israel itself contributed to the weakening, to the discredit of the Palestinian Authority. This gave rise to Hamas. Hamas was seen in Palestine as an alternative to the PLO, to the Palestinian Authority. Hamas, which is an extremist organization, so the actions on this part of Israel and the inability or indifference of the international community strengthen the pro-Hamas members in West Bank and Gaza and discredit the PLO. The Palestinian Authority, they did everything possible to pacify West Bank. West Bank was never a base to attack Israel. So Palestinian Authority lost credibility, lost authority because of the actions of not only, but yeah, so.
Are you trying to say that the international community is not doing enough to help the situation there?
Well, I don't see. The Security Council has become almost irrelevant. First, you have a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia, which invade and destroy another country, Ukraine. It's a permanent member of the Security Council. Then you have the United States, France, UK, 3 permanent members who necessarily, unavoidably, went into war with Russia. Not directly, obviously, but by providing billions of dollars in assistance, direct assistance, and billions and billions of dollars in weaponry. So, US, UK, France, not out of their volition, not because they wanted to get into war, but no one in his or her right mind could expect the US, the Europeans, to just shrug when Russia, after the annexation of Crimea, next step was to invade Ukraine. So, Security Council, discredit. The only country that seemed to have some sensible position in all of this, in terms of this Security Council, is China. China is not directly involved in Ukraine war, one side or another. They are not providing weapons, finance to Russia. And China is not involved in support of Hamas or Israel. So China is the only permanent member of the Security Council, seems to be having an even approach and with potential, maybe working with Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, to mediate this. Because the U.S., obviously, unfortunately, I have the greatest respect, admiration for the U.S., but it has almost zero credibility in regard by the Palestinians.
So, Mr. President, is there anything else the international community can do to help the situation, or it sounds quite bleak at this point? Is there anything the international community can do at this point to help the situation?
Well, even on the humanitarian side, in some of the war situations in the world, in Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, UN humanitarian agencies are there, were there. In North Korea, only in Gaza that the UN, more than 100 workers, UN workers, officers in Gaza have been killed. And many, many other humanitarian people. The number of journalists killed in Gaza by the Israeli bombardment is higher than the number of journalists killed over many, many years. The number of UN personnel killed in Gaza is just astonishing. Of course, as I mentioned, more than 10,000 civilians 80% children killed in Gaza. If Israel had any moral, I would say, any moral quality as a victim of Hamas aggression, it lost it. If it had behaved recently, resisting the temptation of an eye for an eye, or 10 eyes for a one eye approach, if it had resisted that, yes, Israel would come up with credibility, because it lost more than 1,000 people, innocent people, but it knew how to react in a measured way. Because when you are political leaders, when you are military leaders, you just don't go and react. Well, they did what Hamas set a trap. Set a trap to the international community, a trap to Israel to provoke. And they reacted. Had they not done what they did, Hamas have been politically totally destroyed.
Mr. President, another country struggling with conflict is your neighbor, Myanmar. You've asked ASEAN to do something about the human rights crisis there. And in fact, you also rejected the military junta there, and because of this, they expelled your top diplomat. How important is it for Timor-Leste to make a stand as far as Myanmar is concerned?
Well, I know Myanmar well, like few people in the region at least, or in the world. I know I've been there many times, even before Suu Kyi was released, and I have many, many friends. And I would say extremely complex situation. However, it is far easier, more hopeful to view a resolution of the Myanmar conflict than, of course, Gaza and Palestine, Israel. I thoroughly agree, endorse the 5-point consensus negotiated by ASEAN with the military ruler. He had signed on to the 5-point agreement. It is very simple, and I believe sooner or later the military Myanmar will come to their senses, because they are not winning the war. They totally underestimated their own people. The war today in Myanmar is not like before the latest round of violence. In the past, the conflict has been going on for 50 years. The conflict involved primarily, the armed conflict, primarily ethnic nationalities with the Myanmar military, not the vast majority of people who are the Burmese. And, but today, the entire nation is opposed to the military, sympathetic, supporting the resistance, and many are joining the ethnic armies. The NUG, the National Union government, that is comprising people from NLD and the ethnic armies, they control about 60% to 70% of the territory. They have an abundance of access to money. They have their own banks. Their own trade going on. They even do lottery. And so they have a skeleton of a functioning economy, a functioning transition administration. At least one full battalion of the Myanmar army defected 2 months ago to the resistance fighters. Many individually are defecting. But having said that, I do not think there will be a military solution. It means only that in view of the military stalemate and the tremendous economic damage done to the economy by the military, they will agree to negotiate. And that's when I would tell all sides, the opposition in Myanmar, to agree to sit down with the military under obviously the mediation of ASEAN, whoever ASEAN designate, because there's not going to be a military solution, and the war cannot drag on and drag on. It is catastrophic for Myanmar.
Okay. Another issue plaguing ASEAN is the dispute in the South China Sea. China has been more aggressive recently, building structures, harassing vessels, even making sweeping territorial claims with a new map that they've introduced. So, as a prospective member of the ASEAN, what would your position be on this issue?
We, as neighbors to many ASEAN countries, particularly Indonesia, and neighbors to Australia, and a prospective member, I hope we will join by 2025 as a full member. We align our position with the position taken by ASEAN countries. And the position of ASEAN countries and the international community cannot be but based on UNCLOS, the United Nations Law of the Sea, which established a median line for the EEZ, exclusive economic zone, for every coastal state. International law also stipulate about an impediment for free navigation. No one should hinder freedom of navigation. Any coastal state is entitled to its territorial waters, 12 nautical miles, contiguous zone, and to EEZ, which when it doesn't overlap, it is 200 miles. When it overlaps, there is a median line. And that's what international law of the sea is all about. And China worked relentlessly for years in the drafting, negotiation of the law of the sea convention, which was voted, if I'm not mistaken, in 1982. So ASEAN countries first have to stick together, whether those that have the overlapping claims with China, or those who are landlocked, whoever they are. You are part of an organization. You have to show solidarity to each other. And this is a major issue. So ASEAN should negotiate as ASEAN. It means the coastal states with overlapping claims supported by the landlocked ASEAN countries, or non-landlocked but without claiming overlapping claims. They should. So ASEAN has to have a solidarity, solid. Otherwise, it weakens ASEAN and can be very damaging to its credibility. China, as a superpower, with its 5,000 years of wisdom, its many decades of past conflicts, I know it will understand that its own interest lays in continuing peace in the region and in the world. The Chinese side knows that. So they have to really measure every word, every step that they take as a global power, as a regional power.
Timor-Leste had a similar maritime dispute with Australia, which was resolved via a treaty in 2018. Is there anything we can learn from this treaty, or maybe is that approach something we could adopt for the South China Sea?
Yeah, that would be the ideal. That those with overlapping claims, particularly ASEAN countries, but supported by all other without any overlapping claims, together with China, they ask for UN mediation, as we did with Australia. Initially, Australia rejected, but in the end, it accepted, and then the two sides agree on a commission of experts, credible, that guided, helped us in the end reaching an agreement in 2018. The agreement was signed in New York, written by the Secretary General. Beneficial to Australia, beneficial to us, obviously, and it shows how a mature country like Australia, a democracy, does not reject submitting to an international mechanism, whether UN or some other international mechanism to resolve. If China and ASEAN countries were to agree with that, if China were to agree with that, well, it would show how China is, for instance, different from the United States. For the United States did not subscribe to the international law of the sea conference treaty, and the United States does not very much agree with the 200 exclusive economic zone principle.
What makes this more complicated is that China has repeatedly said that there's nothing ASEAN can do to change the situation. If that's the stance of China, where does that leave us now?
Well, I would say it is a non-winnable situation for China. China is a rising regional global power. Even global powers like the US need friends, need friendly neighbors. China benefit a lot from peace, stability in the region, benefit a lot from trade and investment with ASEAN countries. ASEAN countries also benefit a lot from export to China. All of this can be damaged, undermined, if one side imposes its will on the other that are smaller, and it's not going to win.
We've recently had the Australian ambassador, HKU, right here in the studio, and she spoke of the Indo-Pacific endeavor, which Timor-Leste is also part of. How important are these joint military exercises for your country?
Well, we have no problems with military exercises. We have participated a number of times with Australia, with the United States, in our own waters, in the region. But Timor-Leste is not involved in any security arrangement, any security alliance of any sort that is aimed at a particular regional power. We do not believe, I do not believe that the South China Sea, Asia would benefit with new military alliances. There is no military alliance in Asia except, and the only military alliance in Asia is an extra power. United States have military alliance with Philippines, with Japan, with South Korea, for historical reasons. There is no military bloc as such in Asia. There were attempts to do it way back in the 50s and 60s, the so-called SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and that never really came into practice. So I hope that the Indo-Pacific is a partnership for peace, for cooperation, for prosperity. But to do that, the Indo-Pacific group must engage China in dialogue. You cannot talk about peace and security, prosperity in Asia and ignore China, and vice versa. So.
My next question is regarding Negros Oriental Congressman Arnolfo Teves. He has applied for political asylum, and your government has rejected that application, which President Marcos welcomed, because that would be a step closer towards us bringing him home so that he could face his criminal charges here. But since there is no existing extradition treaty between our two countries, what other options are available to us to be able to do this?
Well, when our government at the time made a pronouncement saying that it will not grant asylum to the gentleman. I, at the moment as president, 2 days later, or I don't remember the exact date, I support the government decision because in the meantime, I reviewed all the information we have, and it was not a question of political asylum. And on the other hand, Philippines is a democracy, functional democracy, independent of judiciary, and so the notion of political asylum for a Filipino is a bit like a Timorese requesting political asylum in Washington or in the UK. Of course, the Americans and the British would be totally confused. What you're talking about? Timor-Leste is the #1 democracy in Southeast Asia. And so there is no basis for that. But we have our legal process. It was rejected, the application was rejected by our prosecutor general, and then went to our Court of Appeal, which is our Supreme Court, and they are following the procedure in Timor-Leste. It's slow, tedious, but knowing what I know, I don't think the Court of Appeal will make any decision that's different from the views of the government.
All right. Mr. President, how would you describe the relationship between our two countries?
Exceptionally friendly, exceptionally good, very grateful to Philippines from day one of independence, even before. So many Timorese studied here. Way back before independence, I knew Cardinal Sin well, and so many other Filipino solidarity organizations, media. And I hope that with President Marcos Jr. and the First Lady, whom I know is extremely engaged in the welfare and prosperity of Filipinos and the world. First, the president will visit us because no Filipino president ever set foot in Timor-Leste, much to my disappointment, because I invited all of them, each of them. I invited, please come, please come. And they said, yes, we'll go, but it didn't happen. So I hope that President Marcos Jr. will be coming. I met with President Marcos Jr. in Riyadh at the ASEAN and GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. Very accessible, charming gentleman, a consummate diplomat, very friendly with me. And we developed some, I believe, chemistry. We have many common friends. And so I hope that the president will visit us soon.
I suppose this is something you will be taking up when you meet him tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And my last question is, what kinds of areas of cooperation do you foresee between the Filipinos and the Timorese?
There are a number of areas that Filipinos can contribute. Look at Timor-Leste as an investment destination. We have dozens of investors flocking to Timor-Leste now. We are a new country. We have a potential for more resources, as I mentioned, with the development of Greater Sunrise, the new gas field. We have done public-private partnership with other companies, like we built our newest modern port, fully automated, with PPP, with French company Bolloré, with IFC, International Financial Corporation. So it can be done with any Filipino company if our interests match. But we need more scholarships for Timorese to come, but for science and technology, Timorese, we have had already experience like that. Timorese doctors who have come for a specialization in Philippines. Maybe we need to expand that. In the IT sector, renewable energy, solar technology, and so on. Airline connection possibility. This, if and when the president comes, before that, obviously, the two sides at appropriate level will review what are the possibilities for when the president comes. We would sign an agreement. I look forward to Timor-Leste and Philippines agree on a comprehensive strategic framework agreement that would encompass A to Z partnership.
Thank you very much, Mr. President,
you.
for your time with us this afternoon.
Thank
It's
you.
truly an honor to have you here.